Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm sure in the past year or so, you have heard news reports of the imminent US economic meltdown. You have seen it in business reports and so forth. And we even spoke about it here on this channel when we spoke about the recession in the US. Now, there has been a lot of questions. Some of the people have been asking exactly how will that impact us here in Africa. In this video, we're talking about how a US economic meltdown will affect you wherever you might be. It could be in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. Welcome to a new and improved Friday Money Matters, this Friday and every other Friday on this channel. Okay, let us unpack the impact that the US economic meltdown will have on your finances. First and foremost, we're talking about the US wobbles. Imagine the US as a giant machine with tentacles that are connected to every part in the world, every economy, every industry, and every sector. This means that when it shakes around or there are disruptions, there are ripples across it, this will be felt in any other country across the world. And in this case, we're talking about the ripple effects that a meltdown will have on African economies and households in Africa. This is how it will affect you. Let's talk first and foremost about the mighty dollar. We know that a lot of countries peg their currencies against the dollar, and as such, the dollar is a reserve currency for most part of the world. It is used in trade, it is used in finance transactions for big movements of goods and services, and also changes in currencies, whether the currency is floating on the market or whatever the case might be. There is always a link somehow to the US, and the US dollar has been adopted as a standard in most economies across the world. Therefore, what this means is that any problems that might exist in the dollar will affect any other economy or any other business transactions that are held elsewhere. One of these impacts will involve imports. Economies that are heavily dependent on imports will suffer serious negative repercussions when the dollar decreases in value. The second one is investor jitters. We know that the majority of big money comes from Western countries and predominantly from the US. Now, when there is a problem, for example, in the US economy, you will find that big money will remove their money from investments, either in the stock market and so forth. What this means is that the investors become nervous when there is an economic downturn. Now, such actions by these investors means that we will have instances of stock market crashes as have happened before in the past. Now, when a stock market crashes, basically what it means is that the general prices of stocks is going down. Now, imagine your money that has been invested maybe on the New York Stock Exchange or any other stock exchanges across the world. It means therefore that you will see decreases in what you have put in as investment. Now, in other cases, we have seen total investments being totally wiped out because of a stock market crash. Now, you might say you are invested only through a South African financial manager or a South African bank. But for your own information, your personal financial manager always finds opportunities in other areas, in other countries, in other stock markets. So there is a chance that your pension fund, your savings are also invested elsewhere in the world. So whatever happens there in the US will have an impact on your savings or your pension fund. Another issue that we need to talk about are trade wars. Now, if the economy, the US economy goes down, probably the US might be prompted to institute trade wars. What this basically means is that it can increase its tariffs, making imports from the US expensive. Now, this means that the general day-to-day living of so many commodities being consumed elsewhere in the world becomes a little bit pricey, because these tariffs are meant to discourage such imports. Now, tariffs usually are a way of getting back at other countries or trying to find a way to stabilize or normalize trade between countries. Now, a weaker dollar can cause the US to venture into such territory, having serious repercussions, especially for African economies that are mostly dependent on imports. Okay, if you've made it this far, please subscribe to the channel. We'll appreciate your efforts. You still could be arguing with yourself, or maybe contemplating on exactly the impact of a US economic meltdown. Now, to go further, let's look at US aid, for instance. Now, the US has got a lot of foreign aid that it gives to other countries. Now, this benefits a lot of sub-Saharan African countries in terms of education, development programs, and many other issues such as healthcare and so forth. Now, all these are dependent primarily on aid coming predominantly from the US. You've got a lot of countries with ailing economies, therefore they've got poor healthcare, poor education systems, though they depend on such aid. You have others being given even foodstuffs. You've got US aid bringing food and so forth to Africa. All this is dependent on a vibrant US economy, and when a meltdown occurs, such aid will decrease, and day-to-day living for most African countries will be affected. Another issue worth talking about is investment slowdown. We've got a lot of foreign investment, foreign direct investment going from the West, especially the US, to a lot of African countries for developmental purposes, for building infrastructure and so forth. Now, a slowdown in investment from the US will affect such developments, and this will have a negative repercussion, especially on job creation and other developmental programs. Now, remember that South Africa is amongst the countries that have got the highest youth unemployment in double figures, biggest in Africa and across the world. Now, if such investment slowdowns were to occur, it means that the problem of youth unemployment will become even worse. When it becomes worse, it means that incomes for households and many other families will be affected negatively, and such will bring a lot of African individuals and their households in serious financial difficulties. I think it also bears mentioning here that a lot of African countries also depend on exports of commodities. You've got countries exporting commodities such as oil, gold, platinum, copper, and so forth. Now, because mostly they are primary sector industry based and moving gradually towards secondary sector, it means that if there is a meltdown in the US economy, you are losing one of the biggest consumers of those, or one of the biggest customers of commodities. Now, if the demand for those commodities were to decrease, it means that the income that was expected by these African countries that are exporting these commodities will have serious impacts in terms of the income that the company raises from such exports. Therefore, this will have a dent on the day-to-day living, because GDP per capita will decrease and income levels as a general in that particular economy will decrease. Imagine then that you're working for a mining company that exports, for example, platinum. If it is facing a decrease in demand for the platinum, it means also that your income, your salary, your wages could be affected, no pay hikes and so forth. Okay, some might be saying that I'm painting this very gloom picture. However, we know that in every dark cloud there is always a silver lining. Now, what's the silver lining in the meltdown? If you're in Africa now, what hope is there for you? Okay, first and foremost, we have seen that there are some African countries that are growing even at a rate that is faster than their Western counterparts. One of those is Nigeria, which we just did in a video, which I'll link down below. we have seen it growing from 2021 with nominal GDP figures of 441 US billion dollars going to 478 billion in 2022 and 540 in 2023. Now, such growth can be seen in Africa, and because there is such growth, this creates an opportunity for alternatives, meaning that money that was invested previously in Western countries like the US can now be invested in African economies, which provide that opportunity to see such investment grow, be it in tech, be it in agro-based industries, in mining, and in other primary and secondary sector industries. The second item worth mentioning again is intra-African trade. There are a lot of trading blocks in Africa. One of those includes SADC, which is a trading bloc for Southern African countries, and there are some for Eastern African countries, Western African, Northern African countries. What this basically means is that such trade within African countries provide opportunities for growth within Africa, where Africa becomes independent from the West. Okay, you can also even focus on bilateral trade agreements, for example, South Africa, Botswana, South Africa, Angola, South Africa, Zimbabwe, bilateral agreements, which means that we have agreements being formed between countries, okay, in pairs, countries pairing up to form a trade agreements that benefits their citizens and that will improve their income levels. The third silver lining is the digital revolution. We've seen so much growth in internet and the internet of things, digital products, digital tools in business and so forth. This has led to a lot of tech startups, but developments in the tech industry, and a lot of countries in Africa are coming on board, and this means that they don't have to depend on the US for technology and all these other new and upcoming innovations that are making business and the art of raising money and income simpler and much easier for people in Africa. Now, there are still things that you can do as an individual. First and foremost, you need to keep your ear on the ground every time. Immerse yourself in the world of business, keep up to date with information, with knowledge, keep building yourself up and knowing exactly what is transpiring across the globe in terms of the economics of other countries, especially the US, the European Union, the Asia, and so forth. Now, knowing this will give you the right kind of information that will give you an edge that will make you make the best decisions when that meltdown finally occurs. Second thing that you can do is to diversify your investments. We know that it has been said that you don't have to put your eggs in one basket. Doing so means that if your eggs were in the US economy or were in investment tools based in the US, if the US were to crash, therefore it means that you are losing everything. Now, imagine what benefits diversification will bring, diversifying, putting some of your money in Europe, in Asia, and all these other African countries that are upcoming and growing in terms of their economies. Doing such means that when one of these investments falls, now the other investments can then be used as leverage against these other meltdowns that are happening elsewhere. The third item is support local businesses. You remember some time back we had the clothing and textile industries in South Africa being affected because of a lot of imports coming in from India and from China mainly, meaning that the clothing and textile industry had to close. Some of the businesses had to close. When that happened, we've got a lot of people being impacted by unemployment and this reducing households' income. Now, if you were to support local industries, what it means is that you are growing your local economies, be it in your township, in your city, supporting locally made goods. For example, back in the day, we also had the proudly South African promotion, where a promotion was being deliberately directed towards locally made clothing goods. Now, this meant that there is some injections in terms of investments by individuals in the economy investing in local businesses. Now, this promotes local goods and also raises local incomes because you are becoming more self-sufficient. I also need to spell it that I'm not really undermining investments in the US. You're still free to do those kind of investments. However, please be advised that if they say the economic meltdown is imminent, at some point it's going to happen. But however, when it does happen, we have seen before other crashes have happened. In 2008, we've got the Great Depression of 1929. Up to now, we have had a lot of recessions, economic meltdowns, crashes, and so forth. But economic systems will fluctuate. They will increase, go into a period of expansion, and will also decrease, go into a period of contraction. What you're seeing now is a period of contraction. A period of contraction will come to a point where it will come to an end. Therefore, be planning for that period of expansion, for truly it will come. It is not a matter of if, but it is a matter of when it will come. So start planning for that economic expansion. That's the positive that you need to take from any recession, is that it will come to an end and soon you will see expansion. Thank you for tuning in to Friday Money Matters. Please leave a comment and tell us exactly how you're planning to hedge your funds, your finances, your money against the imminent recession and the economic meltdown of the US. And also give other advice in terms of alternatives, in terms of investment destinations where you're sending your money, be it in Asia, in Europe, or in other African countries. This is Friday Money Matters. Thank you for tuning in. Do subscribe. Bye.